Hi, my name's Ian Wallace. I'm the Messed Up Counsellor, and today's podcast is looking at anxiety. And I've invited into the studio with me Alistair, who is going to talk about all those kind of things that we all get worried about and concerned about, and all going off in here and not going off out there and all that kind of stuff. So hopefully it'll be really, really interesting. So, hello, Alistair.
Hi, Ian.
How you doing?
Lovely to meet you. I just call them life.
Life.
You know, those things that mess us up and get us. It's just life, isn't it?
It is.
I think at the end of the day. So yeah, no, lovely to be here. Thank you for the invite. Really looking forward to having a chat.
No, I'm looking forward to it as well. I really am. And you know, for me, I mean, obviously with the counselling process, we do work with anxiety an awful lot and depression, and worries and concerns, as you can imagine. But your group is slightly different, isn't it? In the sense that it's more targeted. So give me an idea of what you do, who you are.
Sure. Okay. I mean, there's a couple of questions there. So when you talk about our group, let's sort of give it a name. I run a CIC, a community interest company, which is effectively a charity by any other name, and that's called Wingmen, wingmen.org.uk. And Wingmen is all about providing a safe space for a man, for whatever reason, to have a chat with one of our volunteers for an hour. It's a very, very simple proposition. Maybe if I touch on where it came from, that could help.
Please do.
The founder, he would love me calling him the founder, JJ. He'd love that. Our benefactor, great guy called JJ. I met him a couple of years ago, and off his own bat, because of his own mental health experiences and those of close people to him, he did the unthinkable. He put his telephone number, his mobile phone number, out on Facebook.
Oh wow!
And on nextdoor.com with a message saying, "If you're a man and you need a chat, give me a call," which is
big.
Yeah. Which is something I would never do. And we talk about and laugh about it as being almost the R&D phase, proof of concept, if you like. We're both from corporate backgrounds, so we'd recognise that language.
Yeah.
JJ clocked up over 200 hours worth of calls just on the back of doing that.
Oh, wow.
And he did it all himself. You know, he's a really benevolent guy. He's a tech entrepreneur, so it's not like he's not busy. But yeah, he clocked up a lot of hours very quickly and came to realise, you know, the unfortunately there's a demand for this type of service, and therefore it was probably, there was an opportunity to formalise that as a quote-unquote charity and start promoting it, marketing it, staffing it, get the operations right and all those sort of things so that we can got to a place where we can sort of ramp it up and make it less parochial than how it started.
Yeah. Which is a great thing to do, obviously.
Yeah. It is, without a doubt. It's, like I say, it's unfortunate that there's a demand for that type of thing. How we go about things is very, very simple. I mean, think about us as, I don't really want to say that we're in competition with the Samaritans, but it's a very similar idea. Pick the phone up if you've got a requirement to speak to someone, and we'll have someone on the other end of the line. It's as simple as that. Now, I recognise that the Samaritans do amazing work, but it's not necessarily a brand that might appeal to everyone. And what we found out during those first 200 or so hours of support was that we were getting a lot of professionals calling us, if we can use that blanket term, executive stress, people who couldn't cope, business owners, teachers, pilots, people from corporate backgrounds who were just, for whatever reason, at their wits' end. And rightly or wrongly, not all of them would think about calling the Samaritans,
No.
because of a misinformation or a stigma or just a viewpoint on that. So we're trying to position ourselves as, in terms of our sort of brand identity, as having something that would engage and would appeal and doesn't put that, who are these people, I don't like the look of them, objection in in the way. And the feedback we're getting on the brand is that it's doing that job, so that's great.
Yeah. And I suppose with that corporate background kind of process and the business side from JJ, that marketing and that sending out, do you just work within this area of kind of West Yorkshire, or is it kind of a national thing?
Okay. Well, a couple of things there again. So I'm from a corporate background as well, and we'll probably get into that when we talk about my story. I, myself and JJ want to run this as a business. So it should be very professional. The experience that everyone has, whether they're working on our side of things or whether they are, someone who's calling us, they should have a great experience, and they should leave with a sense that they have been listened to. That's all we do. We just listen. We don't advise. We're not clinicians. So it's really important that we can use and leverage our kind of corporate sensibility and how to run things professionally into what we do as far as Wingmen is concerned. Because at the end of the day, we're there to listen to people who are potentially vulnerable, and we have to get it right. We have to get it right. As far as the location is concerned, we're based in Leeds, but it's a national phone line, if you like. So there is no limitation other than if you're a man, it is a calling. It's a line for men to call.
There's a lot of stigma with anxiety out there. We find in the counselling room, that people kind of have this idea that they can't talk, they can't share, they can't be a part of that, because that, in a sense, that isolating them with the anxiety sometimes, it kind of stops them connecting, because they think I'm the only one that's going through this process, in a sense. I don't know if you see that on your telephone lines.
Well, first of all, not everyone knows, and this is my experience as well, what's wrong with them. In fact, not everyone even thinks that there is something wrong at all.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that level before giving a name, whether that's anxiety or depression or low self-esteem or whatever it is. It's that awful feeling that, I know something's wrong, but maybe this is just normal. And that's what we are, part of, yourselves included with this, Ian, part of that whole community who want to help educate as much as anything and give names to things. Because as soon as you've named something and as soon as you realise that you are part of a broader community, and it's not just you, and it never is, then there's that comfort factor, I suppose. Just rewinding a minute, you talked about connection there. So I devised the brand for Wingmen, and it was predicated on that word connection. We don't have a particularly complicated offer. It's a phone line. We're here to listen, and we're here to signpost, and that's it. But in amongst all of that, we're here to connect, because connection is the first step. Reaching out. And again, from experience, I recognise that. But the thing about, let's call this an umbrella term, mental health issues, is often it's the last thing you want to do. Human beings are absolutely hardwired to connect. We just are. We're social beings, and as a counsellor, you'll understand that. Yeah. But when you are suffering from low mood or whatever it is, that natural need to connect is often taken away. So if we can help by just being that ear and appealing to people through, how we present ourselves and, the brand and all those sorts of things, then so much the better.
Yeah. And that process of connection is massive, isn't it, really? And, listening is still a very, very good skill, obviously. It might not be a clinician kind of process of diagnosis and those kind of things, but just having somebody that, gets it, somebody that doesn't push you to make choices, decisions, somebody who doesn't pressurise you into what you're going to do about it now. That's really helpful, isn't it?
It's really helpful, and I think it's powerful, right? It's super powerful, and I think part of that is the process. So if we get into the psychology of it, maybe for a bit, because it fascinates me. But I just think the process of having someone who is suffering for whatever reason verbalise, just to hear the words coming out of the mouth, because people learn by talking and listening and all that. It's part of communication and learning, isn't it? And also I think in terms of things like I don't know. So I've been through counselling myself, and I kind of educated myself around the amygdala overdrive and all these sorts of things. I think that talking can be a way of not just opening up, but beginning to understand things a little bit better and beginning to calm your nerves down and your heart rate and all those things that you need to do in order to be able to rationalise what's going on and think a little bit more coherently.
And acceptance is a big thing of that, isn't it? Feeling accepted or being accepted.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's we're recording this on the day of the presidential election. Ironically, maybe, and whatever your political persuasion, maybe let's not get into that. No. There is a lot of marginalisation in today's society, and sort of groups within groups within groups, and at Wingmen we don't discriminate. It's one of our core values. So whoever you are, if you're a man, then you can give us a call and you won't be judged. That would be completely counterproductive.
I think sometimes for me though, people judge themselves and then use that perception to see how others may judge, and we judge ourselves far more harshly than anybody else can, in some senses.
Yeah, without a doubt. You'll know Johari's window, I'm sure, and what that tells us is that perception that we've got of ourselves is only part of the whole picture. Indeed. And there are things that we don't know about ourselves and things that other people do. And that's where connection can really help. Yeah,
absolutely, totally. So you were saying earlier on about your journey to this, maybe if you could just give us a resume of that, Where were you when you first started?
So I've been through counselling. It was an amazing process. I did professional counselling with a great guy called Paul on 2 different occasions. And I took that as a bit of I entered it feeling extremely vulnerable, and I exited it still feeling vulnerable, but realising that vulnerability isn't necessarily a bad thing. Because when you're vulnerable, you can open up, and that's a good place to be. What the process taught me is that I've been suffering from anxiety since about the age of 7 years old, and just behaved in ways that were not abnormal, but meant that I had certain reactions to certain things. Physiological reactions. Couldn't stand conflict, hid things away, didn't open up, didn't talk about things, wasn't able to control my physiology in terms of heart rate and how I sort of hold my body and sort of build that stress into myself. But I just didn't know anything about it, and it all came to head for me probably about 10 years ago now. I was so my background is a corporate background. I've had a couple of amazing careers, and I had a senior position for sort of 10 or 12 years with a business, and I'm not here to point any fingers at that business and say it was their fault or anything. It was a circumstantial thing, and actually my boss, who was the chief executive, and Rod, you know who you are, was the person who sort of picked me up when I was at my lowest, and talked about me getting into counselling for the first time. And it was just completely revelationary for me. Some of those themes that we've already touched upon. It's not just me, and there is something amiss here, and it has got a name, and we can do something about it. All of those things are really, really powerful.
So when you got into finding those things about yourself, and realising what was really going on instead of your perception of what might be going on. How did you reach out? You say the counselling, but did it help you to reach out to other people and to other groups and socialising kind of processes?
Yeah, absolutely. Me being me, I became an advocate for it. So I will. Well, the first thing I did was treat myself. If you can't, it's the old adage about the oxygen coming down in the plane, isn't it? You put your own mask on before you help anyone else out.
Yeah.
So you sort yourself out first, and you understand, because you're then in a position where you can talk with some degree of authority and credibility, which is really important, and empathy.
Mm.
And sort of realizing that we are products of human evolution, and the vagal nerve system and all that sort of stuff, fight, flight, or freeze, and that we can actually control all of that through various different techniques that you'll know about way more than I do. You do find yourself in a position where you say, well, okay, I can advocate for this. So I've spoken. So I do a lot of network. I've got a few business interests still, as well as Wingmen, and I do a lot of networking for those. And one thing that I tend to do is to, when it's my turn to sort of stand up and give a presentation or whatever, I'll sort of ditch the business side of things and just say there are people who are listening to this who are probably where I was 10 years ago, and this is what happened to me, and you're not alone, and all those sort of themes that we've already touched on as well. And I love doing it. It's amazing, and there's it's just interesting and exciting, I think.
When you engage with somebody and find those kind of sparks or green shoots or something that helps them to even contemplate making that step, not necessarily taking the step, but just opening their head up to the point that there is a possibility, there is a step, I can do something about it, And I suppose with your personal awareness with that, I think if people know even without saying it, then it kind of builds a better, trust, a better kind of connection. You don't even have to say the words, but they kind of know you know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yep, that completely resonates. It can be a look across the table. It can be a word that you use. It can be the tone of voice or anything like that. But I think it's empathy, really, isn't it? Empathy is so important. It's one of our values at Wingman.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the fuel that powers all of this, I think.
Which you can't really learn out of theory. Empathy. You kind of have got it. I mean, you can enhance it. You can grow it, but you have to have it in the first place, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's capricious, isn't it? Empathy. It is. And I'm not saying I'm empathetic by any means. My partner would probably say the opposite. But yeah, I think human beings are hardwired to connect, and I think that empathy is a absolute common denominator. And if you're walking down the street and you see someone in distress, before you know it, you'll be running towards them rather than running away from them, and that's kind of subconsciously part of it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely, totally. Yeah. And I suppose with that process of worry, concern, anxiety, there seems to be this isolation kind of process that goes with it. Initially, you kind of make the world smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, if it's okay with you, just to sort of speak from my experience, you just don't know what's going on. And so I thought my problem was sleep.
Okay.
I mean, sleep was the problem, but it was the manifestation of the problem, not the cause of the problem.
Yeah.
So I just wasn't, I had a huge hang up about sleep, and it was just kind of, ruining my life and ruining that of, the person who's now my ex-wife. But sleep wasn't the issue. Sleep was, I couldn't sleep because I was anxious and overthinking and unable to switch off. And yeah, I mean, for me, just got to the point where I just couldn't function. Couldn't leave the house. Couldn't go to work. Couldn't enjoy anything. I mean, actually, you know, punished myself for enjoying things. Sort of forced myself in a direction of, you know, good enough to be able to warrant that new car or whatever it is. And you take yourself in the opposite direction. I don't know if, I mean, you're a counsellor, so that maybe that's something you hear a lot. I don't know, but that's my experience.
It is. Yeah, absolutely. You know, and it's really hard for people to explain anxiety for somebody who hasn't necessarily had that issue around with their world of their life. I mean, I think we can all be anxious in certain situations, scenarios, but I think for some people there's a tipping point in there that it becomes immobilising. You can't do anything.
Yeah.
You know, as you were saying before about not wanting to go out of the house or not wanting to kind of engage with the job or career or those kind of things.
Yeah.
Can you simplify, and I know it's a very vast area, but can you simplify how that is in some way that people might understand it?
I can. I'm really pleased you asked this, because it allows me to tell you how my counsellor simplified it for me.
Okay.
So how it feels to be anxious is the 3 P's. Personal, perpetual, and I forget the third P, but it alludes to the kind of the size of things. So let's take them one by one. Personal, something bad has happened, and it's happened because of something I did.
Right. Yeah.
In other words, you know, let's not be rational about this, because if I was to be able to think rationally about it, I'd realise it wasn't caused by me, or maybe I was just part of the cause or something like that. But no, when you're anxious, as soon as something goes wrong, it's because of something you've done. So that's the first one. P, perpetual, that bad thing that happened, that I was the cause of, will keep on happening for as long as I live. And the old adage there, I suppose, would be, you're walking down the street, there's a fire engine with its alarms going off in the other direction. I've left the oven on and my house is burnt down, and that fire engine. So you look for those triggers everywhere. Yeah. And the third P, which I've now remembered, which is proportion. You just get everything out of proportion. You cannot keep a logical sense of, oh, this was just something that's happened and I need to move on from it. So that immobilisation, I think that was the word that you used, Ian. If it was exactly the right word. The thing has happened because it's me. It's always going to keep on happening, and it's a massive thing. And when you put those 3 things together, you become immobile, and you cannot operate, and you cannot, you know, be a dutiful father or husband or work colleague or anything like that. You're just incapacitated, and it is completely incapacitating. So that's the answer that I was given, and that I share as well. Hopefully that's what you were looking for.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, as from the counselling point of view, we work with it an awful lot, as you can imagine. And it kind of, for me, if we start putting the medical terminology on it, it kind of doesn't really work. It gives it a title, it gives it a name, it gives it a box, whatever you want to call that. But actually, it doesn't necessarily help somebody who is anxious, because that kind of gets lost in all the anxiety, if that makes sense, you know? So I kind of like explain it by, like, you know, you've got a thought that then becomes a virus, and it just goes everywhere, and there's no end, and there's no conclusion.
So the perpetual.
Yeah, absolutely.
In there as well,
and it just keeps going round and round and round. And so one item, you know, the oven being left on and those kind of things, becomes the whole thing. And that kind of makes it really hard to concentrate on anything else, I would imagine, you know. I have anxieties, because I think everybody has, but not to the point where it immobilises me, you know.
Right.
So I don't get it. I can't tell you how it is, because I think it's different for everybody in any case. I don't think there's one thing that says it. But that sometimes kind of makes sense to people in that kind of way. It just takes over, that virus aspect, you know. I don't know, does that make sense to you?
It does. I mean, a couple of things there. It does take over. So just on the wording almost, one thing I learnt through counselling, and counselling was an educational process. Let's be clear about that. Well, it was for me anyway. That was my experience. But I like learning, so maybe that's just me.
No, I think it is for most people, to be honest, Alistair. I think it's helpful to go in hand with the kind of other stuff that we do. The educational stuff is actually beneficial,
Yeah, I think so. So I heard this phrase neuroplasticity, which is a medical term that might marginalise some people, but if we call it habits instead, if we change the language around that, then all of a sudden, I understand what a habit is.
Indeed.
And you can break a habit, you can change a habit. What's actually happening there is, again, you probably know, is because your brain is plastic. I know your brain isn't plastic, but mine feels like it today after staying up and watching the election last night. But because it's moldable, what you can do is you can find different neural pathways in your brain, which means that that perpetual part of what we've called anxiety can be rewired. Well, okay, so let's. So my old thing was, I don't want to be at work, but I don't want to be on holiday. And I'm not happy when I'm at work. I need a holiday. I go on holiday. I'm not happy on holiday. I need to be at work. It just stuck. Yeah. That was it every year. Hated it. But there's something happening there. There's a habit which has been formed over the years, which has become deeply ingrained physiologically in your brain and in your behaviour, that can be rerouted, and it just needs you to be able to stop and think about it and bring yourself back down to the ground by whether that's meditation or breathing or mindfulness or whatever it is works for you. You can think, hang on a minute, I can go another way about this, and it's going to be hard at first because finding any new pathway through the brain is harder than using a pre-existing one. Indeed. Obviously, that's why habits are hard to break. Yeah. But it absolutely can be done. So I think just reflecting back on what you're asking there, we can dress all of this up in medical language, or whatever. But if we'd name what I've been describing there as habits, then it's like, okay, well I understand that, and maybe I can be empowered to do something about it because I now understand it.
Yeah. And I suppose until you know it's a habit, Jar's window kind of process, you won't even know it's there because it's such a feature of you.
You just think it's normal.
Yeah,
you think it's part of your psyche and your mentality, and it's not. We learn everything. I mean, we're born with two fears, only two: the fear of heights and the fear of loud noises. Everything else that causes us fear or uncertainty or anxiety is learnt. Everything. And if it's being learned, it can be unlearned, and you can take another route.
Yeah. Which is not easy to do, obviously. As you say, it's hard to kind of get even into that process initially to even contemplate there is another opportunity or another pathway, whatever you want to call that. But to get into it, I suppose then you can see and reflect and say, well, actually, I did get out of bed, which might be a massive thing for that person, just getting out of bed. Whereas other people go, what are you on about? It's just getting out of bed. But for that person, getting out of bed is living on Mars, and that is the hard bit, isn't it, for some people?
Yeah, absolutely. I will still, and this is going to sound silly, I don't care, I don't mind being vulnerable, but I will still, on occasions, congratulate myself for getting out of bed.
Absolutely.
And, doing a day's work, and I'm not ashamed of that. That's absolutely how it is. So I agree, it's that kind of first step, and I think that's where we really want Wingmen to, have a real sort of profound impact on people's lives, because it's simple. Ring us up, have a chat. That's it. You're not going to be judged. We're not going to advise. It's we can have a bit of a chat. It's very simple, and I think its lack of complication hopefully is its strength. And if it's just It's the old saying, isn't it? If there's one person that uses it, and then that starts a journey for them that they embark on, and it's a journey to recovery or strength or wisdom or whatever it is, then we've done our job.
Yeah, yeah. And that comes in all walks of life, doesn't it? All kind of hierarchical processes. There's no one person that's going to be affected by that, or one type of person, or one kind of career, or one. It comes in everywhere, doesn't it?
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's not just careers; it's life, isn't it? It's it's having to live with expectation that the world puts on you, or money problems, or life is complicated these days. But I think let's get rid of shame. Let's call that out for what it is. Let's call out vulnerability for being a strength. Let's talk about connection and empathy, and get beyond the negativity that sometimes surrounds words like that. And instead, let's just say, look, let's have a chat. Let's connect.
You think that's harder for males than females?
The data supports that. Who I would love to think that Wingmen becomes wing person, wing women, whatever, over time. But without a doubt, I've studied the data from Mind and the male suicide rate. It's higher than the female suicide rate. The kind of the ability for men to open up. I'm going to struggle reciting the data, but the data is there and people can find it, and the Mind website is useful for that. So for whatever reason, that is there, and therefore Wingmen's got a hopefully got a role to play in sorting that out and just helping a little bit marginal, incrementally.
Yeah. And it's those small steps, isn't it, that can be leading to a much bigger step.
I went into counselling for the first day and I just thought, this is going to be great. I'm going to be leaving here after an hour and I'm going to have all these tools. And this counsellor will have just, imparted his wisdom and, his superpowers and all that sort of stuff. You know what? I walked in there and spent an hour talking and Paul didn't say anything. And I came away going, that was a bit weird. Could have done that with anyone. Was that 50 quid well spent order? Whatever.
Yeah.
He didn't. Anyone could have done that, but that's the thing, isn't it? It's like, it is incremental. And it took me, probably a year, 18 months worth of counselling over 2 phases. It is incremental, and there isn't a superpower. There isn't a panacea. There's not that thing that's just going to drop out the sky from that wise person at the other side of the room that's just going to change anything. That's not how it works. It's step by step.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the frustrating bit for a lot of people, isn't it? That it can take so long to just do some, from other people's perceptions, small amounts of change. And
the problem is when again, let's use this with caution as an umbrella term. When you're suffering from mental illness, it can sabotage that journey. That voice that appears in your head going, you're getting nowhere with this. It's taking too long. Your partner wants to see more progress. It's costing you £50 a week or whatever it is. All of those things can work against you. And especially if you're anxious, clearly, that just hobbles you. But that's where sort of techniques come in, and for me it was breathing. Learning breathing techniques allowed me to understand that if I can calm myself down, I can open up that cerebral cortex, think more logically about things, and realise that I probably do need to be a bit patient, a bit more patient than I am being.
Yeah. I mean, in my era, the old adage of big boys don't cry kind of process was paramount. Because if you cry, you're showing your weakness, And it was, way into me kind of 30s, 40s before I realised actually the weakness is not crying. if you can open up and you can be vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable to somebody else, that's a massively strong position, isn't it?
Gaz has got a lot to be thankful for, hasn't he? He's got a lot to not be thankful for. But what was it, 1986, 88, where he sort of burst into tears on the pitch, and it was like that was quite an iconic moment. What I'm seeing now is celebrities, pop stars, that type of thing, cancelling gigs because they're not prepared to go ahead. I'm seeing sports stars, pulling out of, their professional teams to take time off. So I think it is becoming. I mean, I remember listening to the radio, and I won't name the station, but they talk a lot about sport. When an English cricketer, or English footballer, British footballer, put his hands up and said, "I'm not coping anymore," and he was harangued by those presenters who were saying, "How much is he getting paid every week? How dare that person use their, position of influence or authority or whatever it is and claim to be mentally ill? They can't be. They get paid £100,000 a week. Well, it's just nonsense, isn't it?" So I have seen and you'd never get away with broadcasting that sort of vernacular these days. Of course you wouldn't, and rightly so. So I am seeing things change, and I am seeing that kind of sort of soft acceptance of the sort of things that you're mentioning, their vulnerability, and being able to express emotion, a lot more mainstream than it has been forever, for as long as I've been alive.
I don't know whether it's changing in your world with the kind of phone lines you do, but the younger people seem to be able to express their emotions easier. It does seem to be, thankfully, it does seem to be changing. And those people can kind of like be more able to be emotionally engaging, So hopefully that message, "Big Boys Don't Cry," is reducing over time, But I don't know whether or not that's real or it's just my interpretation of it.
Don't know. And at some point, Wingmen is still in its infancy, but at some point we'll be a much more mature organisation, and we'll have the data, and we'll be able to look back at the data and look at some of that demographic information. I guess what worries me about the younger generation is they may have the tools that we didn't have, but they've got so many more pressures.
Oh yeah.
So is that kind of are those tools mitigated by the increased pressure to perform, conform, whatever it is?
Yeah.
So being able to express it and being able to identify and being able to talk about it is just one part of the issue. But if everything else is getting harder at the same time, time will tell.
Indeed, absolutely, totally. And as we go through that process, I suppose the worry, concern, anxiety, pressure, where I see it with working with young people, it just builds exponentially as you get into those kind of teenage years, those kind of times when you're doing the exams and where you're going to be in your life in 20 years' time. Who the heck knows that, And so there's an awful lot of trying to be somebody that other people perceive you need to be. Does that make sense?
Yeah, without doubt. That makes sense, but I also, that's my learned experience as well, I would say. And the older you get, the more you kind of realise that, what? How many nights sleep did I lose over that GCSE or O-level study? And, how little it means now. And actually contentment, happiness, all of these types of things are just as valuable, more valuable than, the commercial success that, passing your exams and having a successful career or whatever could have brought you.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we don't know that when we're 13, do we?
Not much when we're 13. I still don't know much. I'm in my 50s.
I was just going to say the same thing, and I'm in the 60s.
And I don't think you ever do, And that's part of it. But just acceptance, right?
Indeed.
So,
Yeah. And I think, people see sometimes that, you know, anxiety can be cured, you know, in a sense. You know, you can stop being anxious. But I don't know necessarily if that's true. I think the kind of anxiety, even at a low level, is there if you're an anxious person, you know. And I don't know whether or not you ever truly get to a point where it's gone. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can only I can only speak from my own experience, and you know, if we talk empirically about it, the degree of my anxiety now is probably 2 out of 10. It has been 9 out of 10. So it doesn't go. But these days, most of the time, I'm now able to identify it and do something about it. It doesn't mean it's gone. It just means that, you know, I understand what it is.
Yeah.
And understand it's something I want to live without. And that kind of self-sabotage piece goes as well, you know.
Yeah. Do you think it gives some people skills, anxiety?
Just help me out there. What? So give me an example.
I don't know. I'm just wondering whether or not, because of that thinking, that constant thinking, that constant perception to be better or more, I don't know whether or not you can find a way of utilising it in working and skill-based processes where you might attention to detail, for example, you know, where you have to be very focused. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does, but I again, I can only speak from my own experience, and it's the opposite. Being anxious didn't give me any skills. It took away social skills. It took away communication skills. It made me less productive at work because, I'll give you an example. The email comes in and you read the first 3 words of the title and you realise it's bad news. So you don't open it, you just leave it.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you read those first 3 words, your heart rate's gone up from 60 to 90.
Yeah.
And you know, you've gone into fight, flight or freeze mode. Whereas a good manager, a good leader would gravitate towards the problem and want to sort it out. You know.
Well, for an anxious person, that problem becomes exponential. It just takes over the whole world.
Probably still got emails from 10 years ago that are still unread.
Have you?
I don't know. Probably. Haven't we all?
Well, yeah.
So no, that wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't conflate anxiety with focus or attention to detail or anything like that. I would focus, rather I would kind of link it to just sadness and incapability, personally.
Yeah. And that obviously, as you said, you know, it doesn't help socialising. So it doesn't help forming and connecting to relationships.
No, it doesn't, without a doubt. You look for the worst in people, or you look for the exit door. Yeah, I mean, I've missed out on great nights out, my own birthdays, Christmas parties, holidays, all these sorts of things, because I just wasn't able to rationalise it, wasn't able to leave the house on that day.
So when you're working with the kind of telephone systems that you've got, the kind of business process, do you think that it's going to be something that, I don't know, people connect to once and then they might not connect again? Or do you think it's going to be an ongoing process of connection when you get them talking? Or
who knows? And you know, there's either of those. Well, neither of those is right or wrong. They're both kind of ways, aren't they? What we can't do at Wingmen is always pair the caller with the same volunteer, with the same wingman. You know, we can't do that, and there are reasons why we can't do that. And one thing that I'm really, really keen on doing is making sure that at the end of the hour's worth of call, we're not leaving a closed door to the person who's called, and we are in the position where we can say, well, okay, you know, based on what I've heard, I'm not here to advise, but you know, here are some people that you could speak to, and whether that's a mindfulness coach or or a business coach or a lifestyle coach or a hypnotherapist or someone who just organises walks in the countryside or walking football, and anything like that. I'm doing a bit of work with the Huddersfield Giants at the minute, who are amazing and really bring home to me that ability to be active about things. I think that's really important. So, I think we are humble about the part that we've got to play in the whole of that journey, and it's a really important part. But it's not, it's not going to lead people to where they need to be. But hopefully, it can be the start of that. And whether that is through one call or numerous calls, I think our duty is to make sure that we are putting that individual forward to an organisational authority or individual or whatever it is that can take up the baton from there.
Well, it's kind of what you said at the beginning. It's connection. You're the conduit, aren't you?
Correct. Yeah.
In a sense, to help people see that there is an opportunity in some way, shape, or form, and that you might be able to refer that opportunity, and that they may or may not take. Obviously,
that's right.
But at least you've started the process of engaging and not judging and accepting.
Yep.
And all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. That's it. It's all about connection.
It is, isn't it? And I suppose the more we can find a connection, be more comfortable with a connection, the more likely are we going to try and find another connection.
Back to habits, right?
Yeah.
I've done it once. That wasn't as scary as I thought it was going to be. I actually quite enjoyed it. Maybe I can do it again. And before you know it, you're finding that new neural pathway, that new habit. And whether it's, again, corporately, we understand the principle of comfort zones, don't we? And it's about kind of pushing that comfort zone out. Further you can push it out, the more you can experience in life, and generally that's a good thing, I think.
So if somebody was listening to this or watching this podcast, and they were in that process of immobilised anxiety, what would you say to them?
So I'm probably going to repeat some of the things I've already said, but I think they bear repeating.
Yeah.
You're not alone, number one. Number two, there might be something wrong with you. There might not. It doesn't matter. Whether we can label it or not doesn't matter. But if you can identify that you don't feel right, that can be a really profound step forward. And then number three, if it's right for you, reach out, because things are better. Like I say, humans are hardwired to connect. We are social animals, and things are better having made a connection. And that could be us. It could be Wingmen. It could be the person next door. It could be your mate in the pub. It could be your partner, whoever it is. But I can't guarantee this, and it'd be wrong to do so. But from my experience, it's a great way forward. And if it doesn't work out the first time, do persist. Don't give up.
Yeah, don't give up at the first attempt. Yeah.
For sure.
Because everybody's process is different. Some people might want to go into counselling. Some people might not want to go into counselling. Either way is good, as long as you're doing the connection, as long as you're doing the kind of conversation, the talking, because that will help to do all the things you've just said, really, Alistair.
Hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. So how can people find Wingmen?
Can I go all salesy for a sec?
Yeah, of course you can. Go for it.
Brilliant. Okay, so when new, Googling Wingmen is going to find you loads of things about beer and people who are going to help you find an attractive partner in a pub. We're Wingmen, not Wingman. The website is wingmen.org.uk. That's the easiest way to find us. We're a not-for-profit, and times are hard. It's a busy old space that we're moving in at the minute. First and foremost, if you're someone who needs the service that we can offer, then go to the website and you can find us and you can book a call. If you're on the other side of the fence and thinking that's a cause that I would really like to support, then your patronage would be more than welcome, and in return for that, I will do all within my capability to, if it's appropriate, tell the world that you've been supporting us. We've got a number of amazing patrons who support us financially, and I like to think that I do a pretty good job of allowing them to tell their supply chain or their clients or their customers or whatever it is, that they're actively working towards and putting this right. I'm always looking for partners. I'm looking for that A-list celebrity who wants to become the face of Wingmen. Because believe it or not, Ian, this probably isn't the face of Wingmen.
You're doing a good job.
I know you're going to struggle to believe that. And my footballing days and guitar playing days are probably well over. So if there is that person out there who's thinking, I'd love to get involved, then that would be great. If you want to volunteer for us, the more volunteers that we have, the more lines that we can open up. Great, yeah. So thank you for the opportunity to sell it.
Not a problem. It's a well worth cause to sell.
Cheers.
Anything that helps people to connect in my world from a counselling perspective and to start that process is well worth it. Because it needs to have that door, that opportunity, that opening. And anybody that can get a person even contemplating there's a door, not even walking through it, just contemplate is so powerful.
That's right.
It really is. From my point of view, with this podcast, it's been really interesting talking to you, Alistair, and sharing your own personal stuff.
Thank you.
Because that's not easy, obviously, certainly with a visual process. But if you want to engage with, obviously, Alistair and their team, we will put the details on our podcast of the contact information so that you don't have to worry about missing it. We'll put it into the blurb. Always with podcasts, my role is that you're watching this, but it might not be you that needs it. So if you kind of subscribe, share, like, somebody in your arena, somebody in your friends group, somebody in your family might be going through something similar, and just by sharing it might start that open door and contact Alistair or somebody similar in order to kind of start that process, because a lot of this stuff's hidden. A lot of this stuff we don't talk about, we don't share, and so if we can extend that and get people connecting, communicating, as we said, making that journey, then that will be really good. My name's Ian Wallace, and this is the Messed Up Counsellor. Take care. Enjoy.